never going to get this high vote come election day is because we, of course, have never been a part of a government. And that's why it's very important that we only have a very short term, that we only implement the new constitution and the national referendum if we want to carry on with the EU bid or not. If we go into a traditional coalition with other parties to form a government for 4 years, we will end up in all the traditional pitfalls. And we have to create then policies about everything, which is very hard because the parties in Iceland are not left or right. We've been focusing very much on opening governing, opening the systems with more transparency and accountability, and making it easier for journalists to do their work and so forth. And we've been looking into basic income and quite radical things in Iceland. Icelanders are quite conservative actually in many ways. So just to get through through the current government and through the parliament, decriminalization of drugs, and to look at it as a healthcare problem is a massive big win for us. So I think Icelanders are ready to have the new constitution. They're starting to realize that by not protesting more when this right was taken away from them and this national referendum was ignored, that we are where we are now. This is quite a dangerous situation because of very complex things that we're dealing with after the collapse. It has been reported that the Icelandic financial collapse was the third largest in human history. So we're still dealing with the consequences of that, and we still have capital controls and all sorts of stuff that makes it very difficult for businesses to thrive in Iceland, new businesses that are in import-export, for example. And if I have to get foreign currency, I have to prove that I'm going abroad. I cannot go to the bank and buy $1 or €1 without proving that I'm going abroad. So I think people have learned from their mistake by electing this new government, and that they hopefully understand that we need to do things differently. And one of the suggestions I've done, which I've managed to, because we're now so popular, that we have a weight in getting out of the other parties if they're willing to do things differently with us. And so one of the things I want us to do with Harry Party is to demand that the promises that are usually done before elections are kept afterwards. And one of the things is to make sure that the governmental agreement is made before, not after the elections. So there's always negotiations after the elections with very few individuals. And I managed to get everybody to agree on that is an important thing to do from the opposition. I'm sure that the current government will never do that because I don't think that they even can acknowledge that the situation is going to be very different after next elections.
Thanks. So we have one more question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hashtag.
We'll see.
وبدأت بديت بساط
Yoav was a bit skeptic about the possibility of technology to save us. And I understand because you can do it wrong in many ways. But I was just asking, like, you're using Skype, which was like, it's proven that its current form was developed by the NSA. Like, you could have used something which is like a lesser evil, like Google Hangouts, and then only the NSA and 8200 get the content and not the Russian mafia. Why don't you? Why don't you insist on open source for conferencing or something like this? You should set an example. The question is also to you all.
Yeah, it's like the pirate role, you get it.
Well, I never insisted on doing this on Skype. It's really in the hands of the organizers to.
Yeah, it's my fault.
So I don't really. I'll tell you one thing about Google Hangouts are only better than Skype. It's all the same evil. So I'm working on, and I've just got passed actually 10 days ago a very important resolution that Israel is actually part of. There are like 166 nations part of the International Parliamentary Union. And I got through the International Parliamentary Union, which I will now refer to as the IPU. It's a platform where parliamentarians from both opposition and government parties come together and work across party lines on different policies, in particular policies that strengthen democracy. And so I got to write a resolution for this big gathering of parliamentarians titled Democracy in the Digital Era and the Threat to Privacy and Individual Freedoms. And in this resolution, I'm working on, or we put forward 21 items, action items that Parliament should do to improve both our digital rights, privacy rights, and acknowledgement that digital rights, human rights, and cyber should not be bound by any different rules or regulations than our human rights in the offline world. And I encourage you to have a look at it. You can find it at the IME website or at the IPU website. And so I think it's important, while the ordinary people in every country do not have any ways to protect themselves. They don't know how evil Skype is, or Facebook, or Google. So they have no ways of protecting themselves because they don't know how to. I could very easily, and I have done it. I could very easily make everything I do encrypted and safe. And I usually have a sticker over the camera on my computer, and I use PGP and Tor and OTR and so forth. But I actually have made a decision at some stage that while I have not found ways to protect my voters and the citizens in Iceland, I should be encouraged by not using all possible ways to protect myself. By not doing that, to have everything open and accessible for the NSA. I mean, obviously, if you know anything about me, you know that the US government legally hacked into my digital persona through Twitter and various other social media platforms. I don't know which ones, there are 3 others on Twitter that I can get disclosed to me, probably Skype, Facebook, and Google. But so I think it is very important that we both, as lobbyists and NGOs and people that want to create policy, do everything we possibly can to raise people's awareness that they have to protect themselves and teach them to set up Tor on their computers and stickers on all the eyes that are on our various gadgets. And to have encrypted communications. But we have to make sure, and this is what I want to do and focus on, and that is to make the legislation, both the local and the global legislation, all-inclusive when it comes to protecting these basic human rights. And so I will focus on that, and while the general public does not have ways to protect themselves, I am not going to be in a safe bubble myself. I think that is a little bit, it's a little bit selfish in some ways, and elitism in some ways as well, because while you think you are protected, the person on the other end that is receiving that information might not be as careful as you are. So nobody is really protected. It is a complete illusion. So we need to raise awareness of it. Privacy is not the fact anymore.
Thanks. Do we have time for one last question?
Yeah, and then I really have to go.
Okay, so one last question from the crowd.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi there. In the film that we just watched and throughout this conversation, this talk, we mainly focused on political issues of the pots and pans movement and also about the technology and the information. I want to ask you just shortly about the economic aspect and the finance economic of the pots and pans movement, because throughout the years you managed to bring to trial quite a lot of bankers and CEO of the banks. Is that correct? And I wonder what are like the alternatives, the economic alternatives that the pots and pans movement are setting up, or the pirate movement as well, the alternative to the current system.
Okay, so that's a good question. So the thing is that the pots and pans, like you have to remember that there are only 320,000 people in Iceland, or I think 330,000 now. And even if the Icelandic government at the time did put enough money into investigating what went wrong, and many of the banking the people from the banking sector have been taken to trial and so forth. The guys that owned the banks, you know, the guys that were not necessarily the banking managers, but the guys that owned the banks, and actually managed to, when the two banks, we had three banks that were privatized 5 years prior to the collapse, that used to be in the public domain, and two of those were actually, they lent each other, so they never actually put any money in it, they just made fake loans to one another, these banksters in Iceland. So the real guys, the big shots, will never go to trial because they know how to protect themselves, and one of them actually still owns the largest and the only really media empire in Iceland,